Well, ladies and gentlemen, I'm not going to try to tell you the history of currency because you'll know most of that information anyway. And I rather like sidetracks in topics like this, and currency is quite a fascinating concept, really. I'd like to start us off with a historical story. I don't expect you to know where that is, but you might guess, if you look at it, because of those conifers, that it could be North America perhaps, or Europe. And if you've chosen Europe, you're right, that's where it is. That's Joachimsthal in what was Bohemia, now part of the Czech Republic. And Joachimsthal translates as Joachim's Valley, named after Saint Joachim. A Tal in German is a valley. It was famous over history for its silver mines, especially in medieval times, but mining silver there goes back before the medieval age. And it supplied large amounts of silver to Europe. So you can see the connection with currency straight away, the link with coinage, and indeed that is true, and for generations coins were minted in Joachimsthal. Does anybody happen to know what that coin is? It's a big silver coin, and you can see that it's got oh, what have I done? You can see that it's got a coat of arms on the back of it. It's actually an Austrian coat of arms there. Anybody know who that is in the middle of it there? Well, that's the Empress Maria Theresa. And these coins were called Joachimsthalers because it refers, you see, to Joachimsthal, where the silver came from. And Maria Theresa ordered that these things be minted. There she is. She is a most important person in history. She's one of the giants of Austria's past. She was one of the great strong women of history. And she was empress of the whole Austro-Hungarian Empire. And, oh, done it again. Look at the extent of it. It was vast. Back in the 1700s, she ruled that empire from 1740 to 1780. She was the sovereign of Austria, Hungary, Croatia, Bohemia, Transylvania, Mantua, Milan, Lodomeria, Galicia, and the Austrian Netherlands and Parma. Look, they even had a bit over there, which is nowadays where Belgium is. It was a monster, ancient empire run by the Habsburgs, of course, as you know. She took it in hand. She turned that old nation into a modern nation. She modernized the city of Vienna and the legal system and the army and education. And she reformed administration, and she reformed the financial system. And that's where this Joachimsthaler coin comes in, because she stabilized economies. This coin, and I'll just tell you what it was. Oh no, I think I've got it on here. This coin weighed precisely 3/4 of a troy ounce. Everyone weighed exactly that. Every Joachimsthaler contained 83.3% of silver. That was its purity. It meant that on any day of the year, you knew exactly what you could buy with it, because that was determined by the price of silver that day. So it got rid of all kinds of confusions and corruptions, and it became the basic coin of most of Eastern Europe, certainly wherever there was an Austrian or a German influence.
John, how would they have known the price of silver that day given that...
Excellent question, and it depended upon what the merchants and the moneylenders knew that had come through by letter or by word of mouth to them. It was pretty rough and ready. It remained the basic coin for trade in Europe until 1935, when it was replaced by the Deutschmark. But more importantly, it spread away from the Austro-Hungarian Empire down into the north of Africa, down into all of the Arab countries, even across to India, and people continued to trade in Joachim's thalers in those parts of the world right up to the late 1940s. And you know, they're still being minted today as bullion coins for collectors to use. Joachim's thaler was a bit of a mouthful for people to say, and so it was shortened to thaler. And you may have heard of these things referred to as thalers. You wouldn't have noticed in the previous picture that the one I showed you was minted in 1780. After she died, every thaler was minted it was dated 1780. And every thaler to this day has her image, her effigy on the obverse side, because 1780 was the year that she died, and it commemorates her. That's how important the thing was. Dutch merchants pronounced thaler daalda. And now you can see where this is going, can't you? And when it was anglicised, it gave us our word. And that's where it came from. And it was a very influential coin because other nations followed suit, particularly the Spaniards. And they, after this, minted their own silver coin, the peso, better known as pieces of 8, and often known as the Spanish dollar. And all through Latin America, that was the coin, the basic coin for usage. And that's really why the Americans, when they broke from Britain, decided to use a dollar as well as their basic currency, because it was borrowed from the Latin Americans, and it all directly comes from the Joachim's thaler in the first place. And I'll show you something else interesting. When Spanish traders wanted to indicate the cost of something, supposing they had 55 pesos that they wanted to write about, they P for peso. But that says 55 peso, not 55 pesos, and so they needed to wrong way. So they needed to make it plural. So on it they wrote an S. And that's how we got that. That's why dollar is indicated by an S with a line through it. It's the old pesos symbol from the Spanish dollar. Well, now let's move on, because we want to talk about currency today. Here's a question for you. Are they currency? You can see there we've got a pile of American dollars. There's some British money, Japanese there, and Pakistan banknotes there. Are they currency? Well, obviously, yes, they are. They're American and British and Japanese and Pakistani currency. Are they currency in Australia? What do you think? Yes, they are, of course. Currency is currency. Once it's been determined by some nation that this is currency, It's currency everywhere in the world. It doesn't stop being currency when it leaves home. So if it lands here, it's still currency. Can you spend it here? No, you can't. And if you wanted to spend it here, say you had a handful of it, what do you have to do? Yeah, go to the bank and get it exchanged for our currency, and then you can spend it. And they'll return it to its home nation eventually and be recompensed by the banks over there for their trouble. So I think we need some definitions here. These three words are used all the time, aren't they, in relation to finance, money, currency and legal tender. So let's decide just what they are, because they're different things. What do you think money is? Money. It's not just banknotes. When we've got a handful of cash, we say we've got, that's money, we say. Well, it is, but it's not the only sort of money that you can have. Money is some means of people storing their wealth. And it takes all sorts of forms. It can be cash, of course. But you can store your wealth if you want to in real estate, or your collection of old stamps or rare wines or classic British sports cars. It doesn't matter. You can store your wealth in these forms if you like, or you can invest it in stocks and bonds and the rest of it, or you can have it in the bank as bank deposits, and you can look on your computer and see how much you've got, what your wealth is. For most of us, most of our wealth is tied up in our home, in our house. That's where most of us have our money tied up that way. Currency, well, we've looked at what currency is. Currency is the physical form of money that is commonly used in transactions, and it's issued by a government's central bank. And if the bank doesn't actually issue it, it will be issued with the approval of the bank. And all the nations of the world decide which physical forms of money they will agree is currency. And nowadays around the world it's mostly banknotes and coinage, but once upon a time, as you know, it was cowrie shells, that sort of thing. Anything can be used as currency. And during the Depression, of course, in Australia, petrol and whiskey were both currency. Not that the government approved, but they were. Which brings us to legal tender. And that is the currency that a government declares to be officially accepted as a medium of exchange. And that is decided by law. And in Australia, the two laws that determine what our legal tender is are the Currency Act of 1965 and the Reserve Bank Act of 1959.
No, sorry, Joe, I'll bring it over. What about the fact that some institutions, shops, etc., refuse to accept the legal tender in terms of cash and coins, which hasn't been changed by the actual law?
Good question, that one, Therese, and there is no reason why they should not. There's no law that precludes them from refusing to accept it. People don't like it, but they can. A restaurant, for example, might say, no, we don't take cash here, card only. Okay, they're allowed to. If you don't like it, don't shop there. That's... Joe.
John, does Bitcoin come under the legal tender definition?
Not in Australia. We have not nationally approved Bitcoin as a legal means of exchange in Australia, but because it's international, we don't do anything to try to stop it.
John?
Yes.
Does barter enter into the definitions?
Not officially. We're going to come to that if there's time in a little while, because as everybody knows perfectly well, we're moving away from cash in this country, and cash is a kind of barter, but real barter, that's a good thing. Nobody tries to stop it, and it isn't illegal. So, just for fun, I've got a little quiz for you on Australian currency. It's an easy one, so let's see how you get on. Were those coins ever currency in Australia? You can see they're all English coins, British coins, penny, halfpenny, farthing. That's the Queen Victoria obverse from a whole lot of coins. That's an old sixpence. That's a British sovereign, and that's a silver fourpenny piece. All those British coins. Do you know, were they ever currency here? Were they ever? Yeah, of course they were. When we were originally a colony, like everybody else in the world in the British Empire, we used British coinage as legal tender, as currency here. There was no native currency in Australia for also to come into use like there was in India, for example. So we had exclusively British currency here, except when it ran short and we had to have Spanish dollars, and the centres knocked out of them too. And we had to keep using British currency till 1910, because that was the year that we minted our first money, our first cash here in Australia. Next question. There are some familiar things. All the old banknotes that we used to use until 1966, and there's the familiar coinage that we used, plus a crown, a 37 crown, which you didn't see very often. So, are the banknotes Australian currency? Yep. Are the banknotes legal tender here? No, you can't spend them any longer at the shop. You could for a few years, but not now, because by law they have been essentially delisted for use as legal tender. So if you've got some at home and you want to spend them, what do you have to do? You go to the bank and they will exchange them for the equivalent value in decimal currency. So you'd get a dollar coin for your old 10 shilling note, and a $2 coin for your pound, and a $10 note for your fiver, and a $20 note for your old £10 note. And you'd be a fool to do it, because that was a lot of money back then, and it's not now. So you're better off selling those to the coin shop on the corner than swapping them for decimal currency. Well, what about the coins? Do you think they are currency? No, they're not. They have been demonetised by law. They're no longer Australian currency at all. But they do have collector value, so you can still get them, and you can still sell them if you want to the coin shop, or go and buy them there too. Not the coins. That's right, but you can cash the notes in at the bank. So if you've got a big tin full of pennies, no good taking them to the bank now. I should have looked this up. About 1975, I think. I think they gave us 10 years when we could still swap them at the bank if we wanted to for decimal currency. Next question. What about those? Are they legal tender? The old 1 and 2 cent coins and the old $1 and $2 notes? Yes, of course they are. You can still spend them at the shop, and the shopkeeper will be very happy to take your $1 or $2 notes, because they will then take them to the coin shop and sell them. But funnily enough, you are still allowed to spend your 1 and 2 cent coins at the shop. And if you've got some and you take them along and you want to buy something and pay with them, the shopkeeper might say no, and he's not legally bound to accept them, but he should, because they are still legal tender up to a maximum of 20 cents. Incidentally, do you know what the maximum you can pay in cash in Australia is? Where the limit is? There is one. 10,000. You can pay in cash in Australia legally up to $10,000. Beyond that, the seller could refuse, but most wouldn't, of course. Next question. What about the big white $100 note? Reckon that's still legal tender? Yeah, of course it is. You can still spend that if you've got some. Now, supposing you had those, would you go and spend them down at the shop? That one there is that big brass $5 coin that we put out when the new House of Parliament was opened. And that there is one of the 2 quarters that we have minted. These are legal tender. We put those out, those $quarter, to celebrate Anzac Day a few years ago. That's why they've got military sort of symbolism in the middle of them. And this is one of the many $10 silver coins that we mint. That's an example out of a series showing state emblems. And that's the round silver 50-cent piece. So could you spend them at the shop? Yep, you can. They're all legal tender, but you'd be very silly to spend that one and buy $10 worth of something with it because it's silver and it's worth a good deal more than $10. And the same with the round 50-cent piece. Don't go and spend that if you've got one, because a manufacturing jeweller could buy it from you to get the silver out of it. Nowadays they're worth nearly $30. There's nearly $30 worth of silver in the things. Even when they were minted in the first place in 1966, they had more than 50 cents worth of silver in them, because times had changed between when they started minting them and when they finally came out. And pristine examples sell for about $100 in coin dealers. So, but the other 2, the $5 and the quarters, they've got no value. You could spend those. What about these? Say you've got one of those at home. Should you go and spend it? That's the 2012 commemorative Remembrance Day $2 coin. And it came out in 2 forms, with a red poppy in the middle or an uncoloured poppy in the middle, and that's the obverse. They all had that on the back of them. And that's one of our $200 coins. Well, should you go and spend them at the shop if you've got them? Oh, don't do that. Those red poppies are selling for $895 each at CJ Downey's mainland coin business today. That's what they want for them. And they're selling the uncoloured poppy coin for $80 to $100, depending on condition. And that $200 gold coin is worth $2,450 in bullion value. So you'd be rather unwise to go and spend them.
Hi, I actually have one of the poppy coins. I bought it through the RSL for Remembrance Day, and it's still in the original.
Still stuck to the card?
Still stuck to the card. I've
Right.
given it to my niece or for her son, who's he's only 4 now, but both his parents are in the armed forces, so I thought it's the appropriate thing to give him, but I'll be telling you it's worth $895. But interestingly, the poppy coin, I had a very close friend who was the CEO of RSL Queensland, and he designed that coin. So Chris McHugh, his name was. He's since passed away, killed in a car accident tragically. But he told me once that he's still got a whole big stash of them somewhere.
Yes, well, they were selling the RSL released them, the Mint released them through RSL clubs to sell for club finances, and they were sold for $10 each on a card in a pack. And that's there weren't a whole lot of them about, and now they're very much in demand, and people charge a lot of money for them. 550,000. It's not a lot. Yeah. So if you've got one at home, now's not a bad time to sell it. There aren't too many coin dealers in our district, though. However, you could always write to Downey's and tell them you've got one for sale, and they would certainly buy it from you, but they won't pay you $895 for it. And next question. Here are some of our gold coins. We mint a lot of gold coins in Australia. That's a quarter ounce, $25, and that's a quarter ounce sovereign. We still mint sovereigns in Australia. Those are 1 ounce $100 coins, one with a swan, one with a kangaroo, and that is a kilogram of gold. What a nice idea of the Mint to put out gold ingots as coins for you to have in your bullion collection. And people who buy bullion, and a lot do, never have it at home. You can buy bullion from the Australian Bullion Company, but they don't send it to you. They keep it in their vaults for you. And you get a certificate saying how much gold or how much silver you have purchased. And when you're ready to sell it, they sell it for you.
John, this is the kind of question I'd ask Danny when we got home for lunch, but I'll ask you, where does the word bullion come from?
Danny.
Hang on, Danny.
It's nothing to do with bouillon, is it?
Probably from the French bouillon, which means boiling, as in bully beef and so on.
Well, there, I was right. It is from bouillon. Okay, boiling in French. To do with the, I guess, the minting process. Yeah, thank you, Danny. Well, are they currency? Of course they are. Are they legal tender? Well, technically, yes. I mean, in theory, you could go and buy $25 worth of something with that one, or you could get $100 worth of something with one of those if you wanted to. However, it wouldn't be wise because here are their values today. The quarter ounce ones are worth 1,730. The 1 ounce ones, 7,000, and the kilogram of gold is worth $227,000 today. Sorry, what did he? Yes, we Australia minted our own sovereigns and half sovereigns for a long time, and people used to receive their pay in sometimes with a half sovereign in it, because the paymaster gave you your money in cash until fairly recent times. When did people start receiving a cheque? Maybe 1960, from there on, perhaps, I don't know. All right, well, let's move on. That's the end of the quiz. How did you go? Get them all right? I bet you did too. So I'd like to raise now the question that everybody has in mind. What are we talking about? What are we thinking about there? Cash, of course. We are wondering about it now, aren't we? And the question that I think that we are thinking about is, that's the wrong slide. Are we becoming a cashless society? Are we destined, do you think, to be cashless? And I'd just like to raise that question and then talk about it a little bit, and I'd like you to come in on this with opinions as you feel like doing it. I think there's a move in Australia to make us cashless. As you know, banks are closing their ATMs, banks are closing their branches, and a bank is banning cash altogether, has banned it altogether. The Macquarie Bank, since January 2025, has not allowed people to withdraw or deposit cash at any of their branches, nor will they accept for deposit anybody's cheques. Now, it doesn't matter much because Macquarie Bank is basically a trading bank. And I don't know if they've got a branch here where we live along the coast, possibly not. So I doubt that it's inconvenienced any coasters, but in the cities certainly Macquarie Bank won't have cash anymore. And that's brought about a few changes, and here are some statistics on cash availability and its usage in Australia. First of all, since 2027, 424 bank branches have been closed and 718 bank-owned ATMs have been removed so that they're not available to people, which has meant that lots of people are finding it harder to get a cash access point where they can get their cash, because the three places that we get cash are those. We go to the bank or to its agency, maybe the post office or a credit union or the bank, or we go to an ATM. And if they're not available, our other recourse is to get it at the shop as cash out, and they'll give you a very limited amount of cash when you're doing a transaction at a supermarket. So you can't expect to be able to go and get $700 or $800 from them. And it is giving people a little bit of difficulty, particularly people who have trouble travelling. And moreover, lots of us get irritated at being interrogated by bank tellers. If you go and try to draw out more than $2,000, you are questioned. What's this for? What are you going to do with it? And if you can't give a satisfactory answer, they'll refuse to let you have the cash, even though it's yours. Because, and this is a government attempt to come down on money laundering and crime associated with larger amounts of money. And they prefer you to pay by bank transfer or something like that, rather than getting out the cash and then going and buying the car or whatever it was that you wanted to do. And it does annoy people. And recent surveys have shown that we actually are using a good deal less cash than we used to. Here you can see it at the bottom. In 2007, about 70% of Australians were using lots of cash for most of their transactions, for 80% of them. But look how that had fallen by last year, and this year, 7% of Australians now are doing most of their transactions. When you think about it, that's so. I mean, We pay for so much now, don't we, electronically. We don't go and pay in cash. Nothing like 80% of our transactions like we used to do. Now, yes, there's one more. And another survey done by a group called Finder have found in Australia these interesting returns. Only 45% of the population now use cash at least once a week. I mean, that's only once a week, maybe for a cup of coffee or a packet of chewing gum, you know. Once a week, and only 45% of us are using it that much. And of the remaining 55%, you can see here that 14% use it only a few times in the year, and 13% don't use it at all. If you add those two together, that 27%, it's about a quarter of the remaining group who really aren't using cash at all. So there's a significant change going on, isn't there, in our behaviour. And I think it indicates a worldwide change, at least in the developed world, of people's thinking, of their sort of their priorities. You see, with the increasing uptake of plastic in the most minor ways, lots and lots of people simply don't carry cash anymore. As you know, you can use your card now in a small shop, at a food van, at the coffee shop, even roadside sellers. We're just enjoying the convenience of carrying plastic or a phone. You know, you see teenagers go up to a machine and they press the button and hold their phone up, and out drops a bottle of cordial, which they take away. You know, it's remarkable.
John,
Joe.
I'm a cash Luddite. I pay everything in cash if I can, and I'm one of the people who gets furious when asked about taking money out of the bank, and especially when there's a line of people behind you, so there's no privacy about your transactions. But I heard something interesting on the ABC yesterday about how cash costs money, and that was in terms of the hospitality industry. And the comment was made that if a cafe, for example, accepts cash, one, they've got to get a float in the morning. Two, they've got to get time to take the money to the bank at the end of the day or whenever, and they've got to quit the money, so there's time to do that needed, and then to find time to go and bank it to something that is open at that time. So, in fact, the disincentives are very strong for small businesses, and especially in hospitality.
You're quite right, Joe. Cash does cost money, and not only to businesses, but to the banks themselves and to the governments, as we'll see in just a moment. But this is how things have gone. And I thought this was funny. Even primary school tuck shops have gone digital. It's true. You can load $10 onto your child's tap card so he or she can buy a toffee apple and a biscuit at playtime. Truly. No. They wake up in the morning, get out their phone and check their bank balance nowadays. Jen.
I'm just curious to know, when you use a card, and I've noticed that you often get a surcharge, but you don't get that with cash.
Yes.
So, just something that I've become aware of.
Yes, the federal government says it's moving to ban those surcharges, which is a very good thing. Yes, Marita.
With regard to those surcharges, do we know, with the Reserve Bank banning the use of them by the person who's charging the money, is the business still? Does the business still have to pay that to the bank? Yeah, they do.
Yes. Yes, that's right. They have to pay for the service, don't they? Yeah. Would you? Oh yes, we do. We all pay the surcharge. That's quite right. Well, is the question is a cashless society what we want? I mean, I know, despite the declining use of cash, lots and lots of people like to use cash. I use cash a lot. I prefer to, because it's how I grew up, and I know what I'm spending. If it's in my pocket, we're all the same as that.
John, it's also the only way that a healthy black market can remain, and it's an Australian.
This is why the government would like to get rid of cash. Yes. Oh dear. And so say all of us. Look, it would be a terrific advantage to the banks if we got rid of cash. It's a service the banks have to provide, but without it, they'd be relieved of the responsibility for collecting the cash and putting it away, securing it in their vault, accounting for it, distributing it out to people, recalling old cash, returning old cash for destruction or reuse. None of that would be necessary if cash disappeared. And it's expensive to them, especially in time, in employee time. They would love cash to disappear because they could rationalise the workforce. They'd get rid of so many people they currently employ, guards and tellers and transporters and all the other things that they pay for. And their shareholders would like that. And it would be a huge advantage to the government too. As Reece just said, the black market denies the government stacks and stacks of GST. If we could no longer quietly do things on the side with cash, we would have to pay our GST on every single transaction that is taxable by GST. And they would rake in so much money. But more than that, minting the currency, the cash, costs the federal government a great deal of money, because the stuff has to be manufactured, it has to be transported, it has to be guarded, it has to be collected up and returned for destruction, and all the rest that's tied up for the government. And on top of all of that, imagine the reduction in policing that they would be able to enjoy if cash disappeared, because so much crime would disappear too. Big crime is dependent upon suitcases full of $100 notes, and I mean, shipping containers of cash. I'm not joking. They would no longer have to do all that surveillance and all of that investigation. It would save them stacks of money too. So we know that businesses, as Joe pointed out, and we know banks and we know governments would like to see the back of cash. What about us? What about the individuals? Well, there'd be advantages for us if cash disappeared, because there they are. You can't be robbed so easily, not quite so easily. And when you leave the house, you don't have to think, what have I got to buy? Have I got enough money? Did I go to the bank? And all the rest of it. We don't have to plan. And moreover, we're all enjoying buying things from home. So there are advantages, but those things don't get lost. If we keep cash, you can still keep doing them all. And the disadvantages for the individual are obvious. To run a card account, you're depending upon some privately held infrastructure to do it for you. Oh, sorry, Brian. Thank you, Brian. Go on, John. That's got it right. And we all know what happens when the power goes off. And we all know about scams. And we know that you can't get reception everywhere in Australia. So what do you do then if you can't? And there are people who haven't got an account anyway. What do? And finally, and this is the big deal, it costs us our privacy. Because as you very well know, every transaction is tracked by someone. We know that happens because look at all the offers that you get every time you turn on your email, because they know what you've been buying and they'll offer you more. And even worse, we can physically be tracked via our use of credit cards. If, for example, the police wanted to know where you were on the 15th of January, they could, with their powers, go back and have a look at your credit card record, and they could say, aha, you were in the Kmart in Devonport at 11 o'clock on the 15th of January. Or your card was there. Someone used your card in there. And that raises for every one of us just how much of our privacy do we wish to give away. And we've got to, well, it's all very well for us to think about it because this stuff is happening around us without our power, but I don't think that we should necessarily just conform to it happily and smile and say, well, that's okay, I don't mind. Perhaps we don't, perhaps we do. I'm not sure. Anyway, that's the end of the story. What can we do about it? Well, I don't know, but I would say every time we use a card, that's a vote in favour of going cashless. Every time we use cash, that's a vote in favour of keeping cash. And I suppose we could, if we wanted to, go round with a bumper sticker on.
Keep cash.
National seniors have given these away. And if you want one, there are a few here on the table. That's me.